2007, I was 9 years old, and my older brother was 14. One day our mom gave us $30 to catch a movie and maybe grab something to eat afterward. Once the movie ended and it had started getting dark, I was ready to head home, but my brother wanted to get food first. We decided to walk a couple blocks to a burger joint near the theater. While we were walking, a man came up to us holding the hand of a young boy. He looked warm and casual, smiling big, like any regular dad spending time with his kid. He said, "Hey, would you two mind helping me and my son for a second? We just need to load a mattress into our truck. It's just up the street." My brother told him we couldn't help because we were in a hurry. I remember glancing at the boy. He looked about 8. He was way too skinny, wearing clothes that didn't fit right, and had this blank, distant look on his face. The man kept insisting, saying it wouldn't take more than a moment. I actually started nudging my brother to go help, but he was fixated on the boy, and he looked really unsettled. Then out of nowhere, he grabbed my wrist and said, "Oh, I think Mom's right over there," and started pulling me in the opposite direction. I was confused. He was clearly making it up, but he didn't stop until we were a good distance away from the man and the kid. When I looked back, the guy's cheerful smile had turned into an angry glare. He jerked the boy's arm, and the two of them walked off. I started asking my brother all kinds of questions, but he hushed me. He took out his phone, called someone, and started pacing back and forth. Not long after that, a couple of police officers showed up, and then our mom arrived to take me home. My brother stayed back to talk to the cops. When I asked Mom what was going on, she just told me the man wasn't safe and that I should go to bed. By the next morning, I'd nearly forgotten it all. Years passed, and the memory faded until one day it hit me again out of nowhere. I was an adult by then, and my brother was 22. I gave him a call and asked him straight up what had really happened that night. What he told me made my blood run cold. While the man was talking to us, trying to get us to come help him, my brother caught something strange. The boy had looked right at him, terrified, and mouthed the words, "I'm not his son. Please help me." Then just as quickly his face went blank again. That's what had made my brother freak out and get us out of there immediately. He'd called the police and described the man as best as he could, but since we never saw the vehicle, they didn't have much to go on. A few weeks later, authorities discovered the boy's body in a wooded area. He'd died from starvation and dehydration. Turns out he'd been missing for nearly a month. His parents had been searching everywhere. The man had kidnapped him and used him as bait to lure other kids. If we'd gone with them that night, we could have ended up in the same situation. My brother was older and stronger, which likely meant there were others working with the man. The worst part: the people behind it were never found, not a single arrest. I still think about that boy often, just 1 year younger than me at the time, and wonder about the terror he must have felt in his final days. Back in the summer of 2013, I was 24 years old, fresh out of grad school, living with my dad and our dog in the house where I'd grown up. It was located in a fairly upscale neighborhood in a big city in Nevada. My daily schedule was predictable. I'd spend the mornings applying to jobs online, and my afternoons at a large park about 25 minutes away in a more worn-down part of town. The park featured a nice running path, a man-made pond, and quiet areas filled with birds and trees. I usually went during the weekdays around the same time, and the people I'd see most often were elderly folks, moms with toddlers, and teens on summer break. It was a big enough park that it never felt packed, and even though the area wasn't the nicest, I never felt uneasy. I'd been raised with a sharp sense of awareness. My dad was a lawyer, and one of my uncles used to work in federal law enforcement, so I always stayed alert. One Saturday, August 24th, I was sitting around bored and decided to browse Craigslist's Missed Connections section for fun. I was scrolling through the men seeking women ads when one caught my attention. The title read, "To the girl I always see walking," and it was posted in the same city where the park was. The message was full of typos, but it described me to a T. My clothes, my build, the exact park, even the color of my shoes and shades. The guy said he felt a spark and wanted to learn more about me. I was weirded out, but curious too. I'd never noticed anyone paying me any attention at the park. Using a burner Gmail account, I replied and asked which park he meant. He responded right away and confirmed it was the one I went to. He said his name was Ray, claimed to be 33. A former military guy, 6'1", with olive-toned skin, dark short hair, tattoos, and a lean build. He said he worked nearby and would bring his dog there on lunch breaks and claimed I'd definitely seen him. He added something off-putting, "When I run I slow down just to watch you." Then he sent me 7 low-quality pictures he'd taken of me, walking and jogging, some clearly from recent days, and asked, "This is you, right?" My heart was racing, but I wanted more info before reacting. I didn't confirm anything, but asked what he looked like. 30 minutes later, he sent 3 separate pictures of different men. None of them matched his previous description. I did a quick reverse image search on Google and discovered 2 of the photos were stolen off social media, and the third belonged to a man who had died under suspicious circumstances a few years earlier. That photo had come from an online tribute site. I called him out on the fakes. He replied with his phone number saying he'd explain everything if I just called. I looked up the number online and found out his actual name was Ray, and he lived with his mother in a house near the park. He wasn't 33, he was 42. He had no criminal record that I could find. I gave in and called him using our landline's blocked number. He sounded older than I expected, and when I confronted him about his age, he admitted he was 40. Not 33, said he didn't want to come off as too old. He claimed the photos were of his brother and friends, which I knew was untrue. After more pushing, he finally sent me a real photo, a heavy-set man with greasy hair. Then he started bragging, talking about expensive cars, vacations, and money. Things turned dark fast. He rambled about liking women in tight clothes and said young girls were his favorite to watch. I got off the phone as soon as I could, after he said he was heading to a bar near the park that night. Shaken, I called my close friend Leo. He was like a big brother to me and worked in law. After I explained everything, we came up with a plan. I'd go to his place, leave my car there, and he'd drive us to the area near the bar Ray had mentioned. It was a busy Saturday night spot. I waited in Leo's car while he went in to order a drink and scanned the place for Ray. Leo had seen the real photo I'd received, so he'd know what to look for. I stayed on the phone with him, nervous, but staying put. About a half hour later, Leo came back to the car, looking unsettled. Without saying anything, he told me we should drive around a bit before heading back, totally unlike his usual composed self. When we finally got to his place, he led me to the basement den, where we wouldn't wake his brother. Then he told me what happened. The bar was pretty dead, just a few stragglers finishing drinks and a birthday party clearing out. He sat down, ordered a beer, and within moments a man who looked just like the photo sat beside him and struck up a conversation which was rare for our city. The guy was clearly sober and started boasting about his wealth, just like Ray had on the phone. Then he launched into a weird tirade about how hard it was to meet good women, and how things didn't work out unless he took matters into his own hands. Leo later told me it sounded like he was admitting to hurting or forcing women. Leo, who came from a family with experience in mental illness, said it was clear the man wasn't right in the head. He paid for his drink and started to leave. But right before walking out, the man leaned in and said, "Tell your friend I'll be waiting for her at the park Monday." The worst part, Leo never mentioned me, and I hadn't given Ray my real name or any personal details. I never went back to that park again. I ignored every new message from Ray, which became increasingly aggressive and disturbing. I figured he had mental health issues, and that engaging would only encourage him. He didn't have my full name, personal number, or real email, so I felt fairly secure. A few months passed. I started a new job, got a new phone number, which only my father, close friends, and employer had, and put it all out of my mind. I made a habit of ignoring blocked numbers just in case. Then, on November 26th, while I was at work, I received 5 back-to-back calls from blocked numbers that went to voicemail, followed by a 6th call from a regular number that didn't leave a message. That evening, I checked my voicemail. A man had left several recordings of himself reciting vulgar lyrics from the song "Me So Horny" in different voices, saying my name over and over, making crude threats and sexual remarks, and fumbling with the phone while hanging up. I searched the last number. It was Ray's. He must have called without realizing it wasn't blocked. I still don't know how he got my new number or learned my name. Maybe he overheard something at the park. I blocked the number. Thankfully, he's never contacted me again. It was one of the scariest experiences of my life, and although I've moved on, I can't help but think how close I came to something truly dangerous. It was a warm night in late July, around 10 p.m. I was 17 at the time, and home alone for the week, while my parents were away on a trip with their friends in the Caribbean. I suddenly remembered I hadn't taken our young dog out for his evening walk. Not wanting him to be restless all night, I figured a quick stroll around the neighborhood was better than nothing. We were out for roughly half an hour before heading back. I went up to my room and turned on my Xbox, blasting the volume. Even with the loud game sounds, I thought I could hear something coming from downstairs. At first I dismissed it, thinking it was just the house settling. But the noise continued, so I muted the TV and tried to listen closely. As soon as the room went quiet, so did the sounds. I shook it off and got back to gaming. About an hour later, the noises came back louder and clearer this time. I was unsettled, but decided I needed to check it out and prove it was nothing. I figured the sound was coming from the basement, so I headed there. The moment I opened the basement door, a burst of cold air rushed past me. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I immediately noticed that one of the basement windows was wide open, one I clearly remembered locking before I left with the dog. My first instinct was to run, but something held me back. That's when I noticed the door to the basement closet was cracked open. We never used that closet, it was always shut. I froze in place, staring at it, debating whether I should open it. I must have stood there for ages before I finally reached for the handle. Just then I heard movement from inside. Someone was definitely in there. I took off upstairs without looking back, locked myself in my bedroom, and dialed the police. When the officers arrived, they began searching the house. Not even 5 minutes later, I heard a gunshot ring out from the basement, followed by shouting. Soon after, they came out with a wild-looking man in cuffs. He appeared to be homeless and mentally unstable. One of the officers explained that when they opened the closet, the man was crouched inside with a gun aimed at them. He fired once and missed before they managed to wrestle the weapon away and take him into custody. What shook me most was how close I had come to opening that closet door myself. Had I gone through with it, I might not have walked away. Since that night, I've never felt truly at ease being home alone again. I'm 22 years old and work as a truck driver. I've been with a major transportation company for a few months now, ever since I completed my training and was assigned my own rig. Traveling along the most remote highways in the U.S., especially during the night, can lead to some unsettling experiences that really play with your mind. One night in particular stands out more than the rest. I was driving through a barren desert area. It was pitch black, bitterly cold, and I was still about an hour away from the closest truck stop. In an effort to stay awake, I had the AC blasting ice-cold air directly onto my face. Not the smartest method, I know, but sometimes on this job you've got to do what you can, especially when you're far from any place to rest. Out of nowhere, something darted across the highway right in front of my truck. It disappeared into the shrubs on the opposite side, before I could even process what I'd seen. All I caught was a flash of white fur, something running on 4 legs, roughly the size of a big dog. Wildlife crossing roads is common, so I didn't think too much of it at first. But not even a minute later, I heard a loud thump, and my truck veered sharply to the left, nearly drifting into the other lane. I quickly corrected the steering to avoid losing control. I assumed an animal must have struck the truck hard enough to cause the sudden movement. I pulled over to check things out. Inspecting the side of the trailer, I noticed a huge dent about 5 feet across and 7 feet high. The shape wasn't clear, just an enormous, misshapen impact. I couldn't wrap my head around what might have hit me. Maybe a rock had rolled into the truck, but that didn't make sense. The terrain around me was flat, no hills or slopes anywhere in sight. That's when I heard footsteps crunching over the dry dirt behind me. I turned around and felt my heart sink. Roughly 50 feet away stood a towering white figure. It looked like a warped version of a dog, huge, eerie, and completely unnatural. Then, disturbingly, it rose up onto two legs. It must have been at least 7 feet tall, with an unusually wide build. I stood frozen, locked in a stare with this thing. It let out a low growl before slowly turning around and dropping back onto all fours. Without hurrying, it started walking away. I stayed still for what felt like a full minute, trying to comprehend what I'd just seen. Then adrenaline kicked in. I bolted back to my truck, slammed the door shut, locked it, and took off. Pushing the truck as fast as it could go, I sped for the next hour straight until I reached the truck stop. When I finally got there, I tried to rest, but my nerves wouldn't let me. I've never encountered anything like that again, and I still have no explanation for it. The massive dent in my trailer was proof enough that I hadn't imagined any of it. Whatever that thing was, I hope I never come across it again. When I was 16, I did a lot of babysitting, mostly for friends of the family, but sometimes for people I didn't really know, referred to me through others. One evening, I was watching a little girl named Lily for a family I'd worked with several times before. Everything started off just like usual, around 8 or 8:30 p.m. Lily asked if she could play on the swing set in the backyard. It was already getting dark, but after enough begging, I gave in and let her play for a little while. We were outside for just a few minutes when I started to feel uneasy, like someone was watching us. I couldn't pinpoint why, but it gave me the chills. I looked around the yard and the surrounding area, but didn't see anyone. Still, the feeling stayed with me, and I told Lily it was time to go inside, since it was close to her bedtime anyway. I got her ready and put her to bed around 9 p.m. Then I went back downstairs to the living room and turned on the TV. About 10 minutes later, I heard some noise coming from outside, like something moving around in the yard. Feeling responsible, I went to check. I stepped outside, looked around, and saw nothing. Assuming it was probably just an animal, I went back inside and sat down again. Roughly 20 minutes passed before I heard footsteps from the second floor coming from Lily's room. Thinking she was up again, I went upstairs to put her back to bed. But when I opened her door, my stomach dropped. She was fast asleep. The room was dark, but moonlight from the window allowed me to see a shape in the far corner, a figure crouched down, just staring. I immediately turned on the lights, and there he was, some dirty, scruffy man I'd never seen before. I didn't stick around to see what he'd do. I bolted out the front door and ran straight to the neighbor's house to call the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the house and found the man still in Lily's room, crouched in the same corner, but the light was off again. They arrested him on the spot. It turned out he had been secretly living in the family's basement for half a year, sneaking in and out through a hole on the side of the house. He confessed to watching the family from the shadows while they were outside, and even while they slept. That night shook me to my core. I never accepted another babysitting job again,